Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big topics. Today, we're diving deep into the art and, really, the science of teaching English. This is all based on an expert training session, and we're going to pull back the curtain on what it really takes to be an amazing teacher in the classroom.
You know, it's a question we've all asked ourselves at some point, right? What's the difference between a teacher who's just fine and one who's truly great? And the answer is, well, it's a lot more than just knowing your stuff. It's about understanding the playbook, navigating all the crazy challenges, and, this is the big one, always looking to get better. Okay, let's get into it. So every single English teacher out there, it doesn't matter where they are, they all start with the same fundamental playbook. And it's really built on two core things they have to teach, what we call language skills and language systems. First up, you've got the skills. And we can basically split them into two big buckets. On one side, you have receptive skills. That's all the input, right? The language the brain takes in when you're listening or reading. And on the other side, you've got productive skills. That's the output, the language the brain creates when you're speaking or writing. A really great class finds a balance between both of these. And then you have the systems. Think of these as the nuts and bolts of the language itself. We're talking about grammar, the rules that hold it all together, lexis, which is just a fancy way of saying vocabulary, phonology, which is all about pronunciation, and discourse, which is how all those little pieces flow together to make a real, natural conversation. All right, so you've got your playbook, you've got the tools, but how does a teacher actually know if the students are learning anything? How do you check if any of it is working? Well, that brings us to a really crucial concept, one that affects every single student out there: assessment. So yeah, simply put, assessment is just the process of evaluating learning. But here's where it gets really interesting. That one word is actually hiding two completely different philosophies about why we're evaluating in the first place. On the left, you've got assessment for learning. This is what we call formative, and it's kind of like a checkup with your doctor. It happens during the course, quizzes, homework, and the whole point is to hope the teacher and the student adjust things and get better. But on the right, you have assessment of learning. This is summative. This is the final verdict. It happens at the very end to measure the grand total of what was learned. So the real question is, are you assessing to improve or just to judge? So, having the playbook and understanding assessment, that's all great. But the real test is in the classroom. This is where theory smacks right into reality and where teachers face these constant, messy, complex challenges. Okay, here it is. One of the biggest debates, ever, in language teaching. Should you use the student's native language in an English class? And look, anyone who tells you it's always wrong is mistaken. But anyone who says it's always right is also mistaken. It's this constant, tricky balancing act, and there's just no single right answer. And believe me, students feel it when that balance is off. Look at this quote. A student pointing out the problem of under-explaining, right, when a teacher says too little. But the exact opposite, what we often call teacher talk time, where the teacher just talks and talks and talks, well, that's just as big of a problem. And this one, wow, this just perfectly illustrates another huge challenge. If you stick to just one single traditional way of teaching, it can get so boring that you completely lose the class. I mean, as this student puts it so bluntly, it literally puts them to sleep. Teachers are dealing with these tough questions every single day. How much should I talk versus letting my students talk? Is using their native language a helpful tool, or is it just a crutch? Should I teach grammar by giving the rule first or by showing a bunch of examples? How much should I rely on the textbook versus making my own stuff? Navigating these debates is what really separates the good from the great. So how do you get from good to great? Well, great teachers don't just face these challenges, they turn them inward. They focus on improving themselves across 4 key areas, or pillars. And it all starts with what Socrates said a long, long time ago: know thyself. And this is what that self-reflection really looks like. Great teaching means constantly asking yourself these tough questions. Questions about the information you give, about your own use of language. Like, am I mumbling? Is my voice effective? Then there's classroom management. Am I organized? And finally, and maybe most importantly, there are the relationships you build with your students. And that brings us to one final, really provocative piece of advice for any teacher. It's a simple phrase, but it perfectly captures the whole art of keeping students engaged. Don't make your students glad twice. What in the world could that mean?
It's this simple. The first time a student is glad is when you walk into the room, because they know your class is going to be valuable and engaging. The second time they're glad is when you leave, because you went on too long, the lesson dragged, or you bored them to tears. The goal is to be the teacher they are always excited to see come, but never, ever relieved to see go. The question every teacher has to ask themselves is, which one will you be?